Welcome to Healing Together. I'm Deirdre Tomlinson. Today I'm discussing sleep and insomnia with Delbert Curtis, author of the newly released Self-Empowering Sleep book, an applicable account of his method to improve his sleep. While Curtis is not a trained researcher or medical professional, he believes we each have the ability to solve our difficulties through self-observation and the application of a clear method. In this podcast, we will cover his experience with insomnia, his trial and error attempts to improve his sleep, his decision to publish a book, and his top recommendations for insomniacs. We also discuss his beliefs about the societal importance of sleep and how he thinks about the holistic nature of health. To start off, Delbert is a software engineer who was born in France and who describes himself as passionate about art, culture, photography, and travel. On the sleep side of things, he was an insomniac for over 20 years, but, as he says,
now it's 7 years I'm insomniac free.
In the introduction to the Self-Empowering Sleep book, Delbert writes, quote, "Lack of sleep has become a societal problem," end quote. I asked him to share more about why he feels that lack of sleep has become a problem, and whether there's a correct amount of sleep. Here, in answer, he shares some key statistics, including the scary fact that, on average, Americans have seen a 25% reduction in total sleep over the last century.
Just to have a few numbers, 40% of Americans sleep less than 7 hours. It's huge. Because nowadays, medical and scientific studies have been proven, in general, it's not the case for everyone because each one have different needs. But in general, when we go lower than 7 hours of sleep, we don't restore the full energy for our body. Still, as I said, it depends. Each case is different. Another number is in 1910 in the US, the average of sleep was 9 hours a day. Today, it passed to 6.8 hours a day. It's just crazy how these habits change within 100 years.
If those numbers stood alone, without correlation to anything else, that would be one thing. But, as Delbert goes on to explain, less sleep is related to increased health risks, both direct and indirect.
And the indirect risk, as we all know, there's an increase of cardiovascular disease. Now it has been shown lack of sleep is related to developing Alzheimer. It lowers down our immune system. After, there's some risks which are just direct risks. 20% of road accidents, living injury, is due to lack of sleep. And for people who experience having sleep problem, you just know all the difficulties we have in daily life, which is lack of concentration. So it makes it very difficult for our studies, for just when we try to be fully present, awake in our relationship, and also for mood disorders. It's very difficult to have a stable mood, and this affects a lot our social relationships.
While these risks might easily stand alone, Delbert added some context by sharing his understanding of what sleep is really for when it comes to our health and humanity. That is, restoring energy and removing toxins from the body. Here is a longer clip of my conversation with Delbert, covering sleep's purpose and importance, as well as the stress and anxiety that insomnia brings.
And I think also it's one thing which is very important to have in mind is what is sleep for? Sleep is really the process which permits our body to restore our capital, our energy on the next day. But it's also all a process of detoxifying the body, a process of drawing the toxic cells out of the organs. And that's what really enables us to clear and refresh. And I think when we understand this, it's really making a change because we understand it's the cleaning process our body needs. If we don't do this, then we start accumulating not only tiredness, for sure tiredness and more complexity, as we said before, but also that's why our immune system goes down. That's why we experience difficulties in our body. Over long term, it really needs to be a big focus because of that.
Yeah, I've similarly read that sleep is something that affects every part of the body, every organ, and every function. So it is something that's really important. And in some ways, maybe that makes insomnia even scarier to face because we know it's so important to sleep well.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you can share with us, we can get a bit of your story. What was your experience with insomnia? When did your struggles with sleep begin?
Yeah, to me, it started really being young. I think like when you're young, you just have like so much energy. You're just like a bunch of energy. You have like the ability even to go out and party or whatever. But when we start the adult life and have a responsibility with work and have to be facing our responsibilities, it's where you just see it more clearly. It causes dysfunction and difficulty of being fresh and centered and open to the other people. It's really something which grows, I think, a bit with time because you have not a control over that, as you said.
Sure. And when did you start to notice that feeling for yourself?
More felt this, I think, in my mid-20s, I would say, just after the studies and in beginning active life. And I think what you said before is also something very interesting and very important with sleep and insomnia and why it's so difficult to sometimes or it feel like to struggle with is because there's this stress or this anxiety we can develop of not being able to do something to solve it. And it's really about managing to relax, managing to understand that this is just normal and that the point is not to have like only like a certain number of hours per night to be doing good on the day after. There's really a lot of exercises with relaxation, with just relaxing the mind, relaxing the body, which can help you so much.
In other words, Delbert is suggesting that insomnia can gaslight you. The simple act of experiencing insomnia and the stress and anxiety that ensues can convince you that you don't have the power to ever change your experience. As Delbert further explains, in his experience, the hardest part about insomnia is the way it terrorizes your memory and makes you wonder if you'll ever be able to solve it. The way it tricks you into believing this might be the only way it can ever be now, going forward.
Not being anxious about having sleep is something important because it's what all insomniacs start with. You're just like stuck into the bed and say, when this is going to happen? It's really, to me, having this memory of spending nights and you watch a clock. It's maybe 1:30 in the morning and you just feel like you turn over and you just see like there's 2 hours which have been spent and you don't understand where those hours just fly. There's a big idea I think we can see there, which is it's really developing a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So we just get into something which is each time more complex.
Against the backdrop of this complexity, I asked Delbert to think of a more personal moment. I asked him to think back to his earliest memory of falling asleep, and he shared this story of being at his grandparents' house, where he found himself trying to match the rhythm of his breath to his grandfather's snoring.
What I remember a lot is at my grandparents, so when I was a kid, and trying to develop some techniques to get to sleep. And mostly was because my grandpa was snoring, as many grandpas. So I could just try to breathe to get the same beat of the breath rhythm as he would have to slowly get into sleep. And that's a bit how I understood also how breathing it can be very powerful for getting asleep.
While Delbert describes this early experience of being aware of actively trying to fall asleep, he shared that as life went on, insomnia became so normal for him that it began to feel logical. That it began to feel like, well, of course I can't sleep right now. That's just normal.
Since a kid, I noticed it and I knew like there was like it was difficult. But after, just I think it's what happened like for many insomniacs. It's just like part of your life. It's part of you. You just like make it as an habit, as a part of your life. So it just looks logical.
In fact, as a young adult, he was able to convince himself that it was actually productive for him to be lying awake in bed at night.
I think in my case, I'm someone pretty creative. I've always been a creative person. And I think I've been using this time overnight for developing idea. Having this time is one of the few time of silence that we have. So now with time, I see I think it was an error because the bed is made for sleeping, for resting, restoring, and you can do those things in your daily life. And it's much better this way. But it's true that for me, I just adopted those habits and I always managed to deal a bit with that.
I asked Delbert whether he felt alone in that experience, whether anyone talked about insomnia openly, or if he felt like the only one going through it. And he shared that in his experience, while friends might talk about a rough night they had or the fact that they were feeling stressed about something in life right now, nobody really talked about insomnia. And that in fact, going back to the ways in which insomnia can mess with your mind and trick you, he explained that for some people, the inconsistency of insomnia itself can make you think you aren't experiencing it.
I could see some friends who would be also like a bit tired or whatever, but I think no one just speaks about insomnia in general. Or we all would say like, okay, I had a hard night, a difficult moment in my life for sleeping, but I think really saying like, oh, okay, maybe I developed insomnia. It's difficult because it's pretty erratic. It's not something which is consistent. After so many bad nights where you don't sleep anything, then you sleep a bit more. You sleep more on the weekends and recover. So you just feel okay. It's maybe by other facts. It feels just normal. Unfortunately, at least it's what it felt like to me for so many years.
All right. So at this point, we've established that insomnia is not fun, and that as a result of experiencing sleep difficulties, you can end up with a pretty erratic schedule that makes it hard to even acknowledge insomnia, let alone address it. When I asked Delbert about addressing insomnia, he conveyed a belief that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and that anyone wanting to treat their insomnia will need to adopt a trial-and-error mindset, and will have to expect some bumps and even some false starts or dead ends along the way.
I don't think there's just like only one tea which can solve you forever. It depends on each person. Each one is different. Each one will have a different sensitivity, and each one of us also have a different background, experience, and is experiencing more or less difficulty with sleep. I know, for example, with using homeopathic pills, it helped me like in getting to bed earlier or to get to sleep earlier. But always on the day after, it was pretty terrible. I was really feeling like not rested, totally tired. And it's something, I never wanted to use allopathic treatment or hormone cure because I always thought like a natural remedy is much better. And I saw also like how tired I was after using pills. So each time I've been trying to test a bit like one thing or the other. And the big difficulty I think with sleep for that is maybe you find like sometimes, being outside, and if you have the chance to go to the mountain, to the countryside, you're going to have like all this rest happening. Or using a tea, or for one time you get focus in your life, is going to help a lot. But the difficulty is to make it permanent. Is really like to not that it doesn't happen on the short time only, but really developing this over time.
You're mentioning that partly it's just about trying and seeing what happens and making sure you sort of know what's right for your own body, which I think in some ways is something that in our modern society we've maybe gotten a little bit out of touch with. We just follow the prescription and we don't pay attention to whether or not it's really right for our body.
Yeah, I think developing this consciousness of making something and also like seeing what it brings for you is so like, for example, first, I think we are in a society where we are used to see like, okay, there's a problem, so I'm going to find a solution. Sleep is a problem. Solution is being in bed and sleeping, but it's not true. The solution is being resting, being recovering energy. It's not because you sleep 8 hours with pills that you're rested. So really like being conscious inside of us or on our body, trying one or another method and seeing if it's good really for us, if it's beneficial for us. And not only because we managed to do something which is a bit functional, but being aware of, okay, did I on the day after being more rested, being more attentive with the people, being able to concentrate more? How did I feel in my body? All those things are really great.
So we need to pay attention to ourselves and our own bodies. But how can we really do this when insomnia makes our sleep so erratic? As I told Delbert when we spoke, personally, I love the suggestions for tracking your own sleep and other factors in your life that are part of your book. And I actually recently got a new Fitbit because I saw that my dad's Fitbit was tracking his sleep. And I'm a total sucker for data. So I saw that and I wanted that as well. But maybe you can speak a little more to sort of why you propose tracking your sleep habits and your life habits. Is it just a question of improving our awareness and our consciousness, as we've been talking about, or are there other benefits to tracking that information?
In the book, I really try to put all the different things which have been important for me. And when I put this graph to track the sleep, as you said, over 15 days, it's because when I did it, I think it was a shock for me. And it's this shock which helped me understand much better my condition, my problematics, or why my sleep wasn't so well. Sleeping patterns for people who experience sleep disorders over time are really erratic. Someday we're gonna go to bed and get to sleep pretty normally. And someday it just goes to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4, 5. And the day after, we feel like we rested because we could sleep later. So as it's also part of our daily lives, it's very difficult, I think, like to have a realistic idea of how do we sleep really. Doing this exercise helps us to understand about our sleep rhythm.
So now we're going to talk a bit about circadian rhythm. At this point in our conversation, Delbert shares how working with and not against each 24-hour rotation of the planet is key to good sleep.
We have been used to have a rhythm based on light is going out of a certain time, the circadian rhythm. We are used to this natural rhythm. And now with modernity, and light in cities, entertainment, all what goes on over nightlife, make us that life just don't stop now when the sun goes down. When for so long, just giving us our natural rhythm. Now we just would go over, and it's perfectly normal for us to go out by night. So one key thing, which is really something which is key in sleep, is having a good rhythm. Managing to set up regularity in our days or nights is something which gonna help our system triggers the correct chemicals that bring us to sleep. Slowly is how we can be feeling like more confident in that sleep gonna happen. So for sure, in the beginning, it's the big difficulty because we are just used to a pattern which is pretty erratic. And so doing this exercise over time really helps being sincere with ourselves and just being conscious of our habits. And that's really so important, I think.
Delbert mentions the 2-week sleep tracker that he includes in his book, which is a great place to start improving your awareness of your own sleep habits and the other habits that might be affecting your sleep. He mentions, too, that there's an added benefit to tracking, which is that it can increase your confidence that this is even something you can address. Beyond increased awareness and confidence, however, I asked Delbert to share some of the top resources he found helpful when trying to address his insomnia. These include learning relaxation techniques, addressing your relationship with light in the evening, both blue light from screens and light from lamps and overhead bulbs, and making sure to have a period of time when you wind down before trying to get to sleep.
To me, I think the main resources now, finding about relaxation, knowing how to calm our mind is very important, because for many people, I don't think it's always the case, but many people have a very difficult time with slowing down the thoughts. We are just like so much exposed to notification, messages, information, things we just have to treat. And when we are just done, sure, we go home and still go like on social medias and other things. So learning about those aspects of dealing with slowing down the mind, calming down the mind, relaxing, being conscious of our body are important. So I would recommend also maybe to make some search about how light affects sleep, because nowadays everyone has a screen, and I think it's maybe a big cause in deregulating sleep. Screens are where we say like blue light. So maintaining the focus to those lights directly to the eye triggers to the brain like the information that it's still the days. So for our body and mind, it's not the time for sleeping. Taking this a bit, not using devices after maybe 2 hours before bed is good. And slowing, like calming down the light before going to bed. Turning off the big lights and leaving just small lights. It's something pretty helpful. I always remember also when I was younger, I did youth camps. And one of the things we learned when you are with a group of children before getting to bed, which is just so complicated to have all the children to go to bed, is they just need to be having a time, passing from the excitement of the day, all the activity of the day, to, okay, now we're going to tell a story, see something, just like this transition is pretty important. So we need this for our mind. We need this with the light also. And just that we can notice in our days a change, a huge change, and know, okay, now it's time to bed. Now it's time to sleep.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm sure that is actually something that I'm not very good at, is having that transition period. So it's wonderful to have that suggestion and recommendation from you.
I think we are all with this.
To get a little more granular, I asked Delbert about his book specifically and whether there were some top tricks and tips for insomniacs that he could share from his book.
That's so many. No. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of advice which are important. And after the point is really like how you bring them together.
That said, Delbert's first sleep tip from the book is that if you're not sleeping, get out of bed and do something calm that will help you get back to a place of sleepiness. One
of the first advice, as we said before, is like, don't stay in bed. If you are just having a night which is difficult, it's one thing I've been taught by specialists. Bed is made like for making love or for sleeping, but only for that. And it's true, like after experiencing all my past years of insomnia, I can see that I've been spending, I don't know how many hours in my bed, not being able to sleep. And this clearly didn't help me. So getting out of bed is the first very good thing.
Delbert's second sleep tip goes back to the concept of developing awareness of your own patterns and your own sleep rhythms.
After developing self-consciousness of our rhythm is something very important. It's really helping in knowing what we have to do to face those things.
Delbert's third sleep tip is all about creating the right space and setting to support good sleep, including things like checking the temperature setting, the amount of light that is getting in through your curtains, and the noise level in the bedroom. As Delbert puts it, tip number 3 is
taking care of your environments. Checking the room temperature is not warm, for example. It's something usually we just sleep much better in a fresh environment. But also like taking care for sure, like for noise, for light. There's many things that we can improve so we don't get disturbed.
Lastly, Delbert's fourth sleep tip, which ties everything together, is making sure you orient yourself mentally and emotionally to the possibility that you can succeed at impacting your insomnia for the better.
The main thing is really like developing time, calming down the mind, relaxing. And before all that, if you are someone who experiences sleep problems over time, is thinking that change is definitely possible and that change have to happen anyway. That's really important, just to change our mindset so we can start thinking, yeah, okay, I've been experiencing this. This has been part of my life for many years, but is this gonna change?
Staying on the topic of his book, I read a passage from chapter 5 and asked Delbert for his reaction and his thoughts on extending the metaphor. I want to read a little bit from your book. In chapter 5, you write about the importance of an ongoing rhythm and long-term thinking, which sort of gets at what you just mentioned here with me as well. You state, and here I quote, "If you have been in a difficult phase of sleep with little rest for several days, weeks, or months, keep in mind that the short-term and long-term objectives are different. In the short term, we may feel we have an immediate need to rest in order to best face a difficult situation. However, it is important to keep in mind that improving the quality of your sleep is a gradual process and that you should plan your actions by first considering their long-term results. This will lead you to a gradual improvement in the overall quality of your life. It is this direction that must be targeted beyond the search for an immediate solution." End quote. And it occurs to me as I read that our ability to think beyond the short term is really an important lesson outside of this specific topic of sleep hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you agree and how you think about that lesson more broadly in our overall lives.
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important because we are very used nowadays in fast fix. We have like so many things to solve in our day-to-day life, and we have, as you said before, so much information coming. It's just hard sometimes to have this perspective over time. There's this proverb to me I really like, which is just, if you give a fish to a man one day, you're gonna serve it for him like this day. If you learn him fishing, he will have food lifelong. And it's really the same for us, I think. When we try to fix things a bit fast fix in our daily life, the day after is going to happen again if we don't pay more time and attention to them. With sleep, I think it's even more vicious because I could have a few nights much better, or I could be like to the countryside and I just feel so rested. I just need vacation or a bit of holidays. And in the moment, it's good, but after it comes again. So understanding that it's really like a direction for our life we have to take, give us all the attention we need to put in improving our quality of life.
Here at Health and Lee, we talk about healing because we think healing it's about more than treating symptoms. It's a little more holistic. And that sounds like it sort of fits with what you were just describing. Do you have a perspective on that? Do you think about health and wellness and healing sort of differently, or do they all feel like they're the same thing to you?
No, yeah, definitely. I think in our society, we have been very used to have a functional view of things. It's really so important to have the consideration of the whole system, as you said, to have like an holistic approach, because it's always by finding the root cause that we can understand how a system works as an ecosystem. If you are experiencing sleep issues, actually there's many cases, and it's really like also the egg and chicken problematic. Sometimes insomnia is a cause because you are experiencing insomnia, you're experiencing difficulty in the life, more anxiety, more stress. Sometimes, or many times, insomnia happens after a disease, after an emotional shock, after grief. Things are related. So we just have to be aware. Having like this idea, this vision of us as a whole and not just about symptoms is really bringing us to another level.
It sounds like, you're saying that we can't isolate insomnia. We really need to understand the causes and the patterns and the connections with everything else in our life as well. Which makes a lot of sense to me. I think, I agree with that.
I think there's a point with that, which is we can't also go like through everything in our life. For solving insomnia, we would have to go very deep in our psychology, in everything we pass through and solve everything.
Yeah.
It's great, but this takes life. This is our process of life.
That's a wonderful point. So we don't need to become philosophers or psychologists ourselves in order to address insomnia. It can be much simpler than that.
Yeah. And bringing philosophy anyway, or bringing knowledge will always be valuable. After, maybe we don't have to be Aristotle.
Exactly.
But reading him can be great.
With time for just a few additional questions, I asked Delbert who his book was really for, whether there was a certain audience that he had in mind when writing it or not.
No, so I really tried to make the book as large as possible for everyone. People who experience difficulties from time to time with sleep can find solutions, and people who, like me, had insomnia over a long time also can find a method which can help them day to day and which is pretty practical.
How many hours of sleep do you get?
I would say I'm a pretty big sleeper. So in general, I think I'm in between 7:30 and 8. And it's actually like by doing this exercise with tracking my sleep that I could determine to know like, okay, that's what I need.
And lastly, before signing off, I asked Delbert to share his top habits generally for keeping sane and healthy.
I think getting conscious of my own life, getting conscious each day a bit more about my difficulties, about my emotions, getting conscious of the energy in my body. Some days we just have like a lot of energy. Some days we are very calm, very low. And developing a consciousness of this is what really helped me by just knowing, okay, then I should react, I can do this for me, which can help me and then help the other people I will react with.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I'm really glad having this time.
Healing Together is produced by Healthenly. Our theme song is Ramble, composed and performed by Ed Morneau.